All right. I am at 51% for this vocal video. I am at 51% way through Patsy Rodenberg's The Need for Words. And more importantly, I have come upon the final exercise of chapter 5, which is formed the bulk of my work on this book. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next. I don't know. I'm reading it along with you folks out there. You folk, me, the only one who would be reading this. This is a vocal release of text, which is actually a rather large one. So I might actually split this up into two, just so that the end of chapter 5 stretches over, last couple of pages of chapter 5 stretches over a week or another week, or maybe even another week. Okay. So, this is a vocal release of the text. Here are a few ways of discovering how different vocal qualities inform a text. Each quality will make you feel different and could release new meanings when speaking a text. After each exercise, it would be useful for you to intone the text, to clean the words of any prior intentions. Keep breathing and vocally free. Try some of these positions. So, this is, because I've had it up here for the longest of time. I've never really cracked it. I've got The Self Unseen by Thomas Hardy up here, and I'm going to use that as the text. So the first one, speak a text while thinking the voice into the head, the nose, the face, the throat, the chest. Each of these positions gives a different vocal quality, but also a different psychology and emphasis to the words. Intone and then speak the text. New nuances might be discovered. So this one in itself, okay, we'll start off with the voice into the head. The self unseen. Here is the ancient floor, foot warm and hollow and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam, yet we were looking away. It's weird. Okay. That's the head. The nose. Here is the ancient floor, foot warm and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day, yet everything glowed with a gleam, yet we were looking away. The face. Here is the ancient floor, foot warm and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam, yet we were looking away. Okay, and the throat. Here is the ancient floor, foot warm and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam, yet we were looking away. All right. The chest. Here is the ancient floor, foot worn and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. I don't know if I can get into my chest. What else we got? Yes, okay, so each of these positions gives a different vocal quality. Yes, definitely. I got a very nasty kind of like, yeah, here's the ancient floor. It's kind of like, oh, God. In tone, and then emphasis, in tone and speak, then speak the text. Okay. Here is the ancient floor, foot-warm and hollow and thin. Here was the former door where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Yet, everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. So that's the intoning to kind of clear it out. Okay. The self-unseeing. Here is the ancient floor, foot-worn and hollowed and thin. Here is the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned the day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. So it's interesting. I tried to kind of like shift between registers there, and that was like, oh, I have registers that I have there. There's face, there's throat, there's chest, which sounds a bit false. I don't know if I have my chest. Chest still feels like okay. So yeah, it's interesting feeling all that different tonality in speech there. Some of it I caught, some of it not so much. There's the throat, there's the face, there's the nose. What is my usual register? Usual somewhere in between in there. It's probably in the head still. Getting into the body of the speech is more difficult. More difficult, yes. Let's try one more. Let's try and get one more or two more exercises, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 altogether. So I think if I can get, well, 6 probably. So I'm going to try and get 2 more in. Speak off your voice or close to a whisper, then do the same with the text on full voice. What differences and nuances do you sense? So off or kind of a close to a whisper. So the self unseen. Here is the ancient floor, foot-worn and hollow and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. And so the self-unseen. Here is the ancient floor, foot-worn and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. So some of the interesting differences, blessings, like blessings. I went, blessings, childlike, everything. There's a little bit more of a kind of a gentle, there's more of a nuanced kind of fingering, touching each of the sounds of the word when I'm not enunciating, which, a lot of this is enunciating. But if you kind of drop it down, like here is the ancient floor, foot worn and hollowed and thin. It's like it gives me enough. I'm slowing down too. Foot worn, foot worn, and hollowed and thin. It's interesting how much it kind of you get a bit more nuance in your words when you drop it down, which is a thought. It's not only are you maybe calling attention, like you're not always high, high, high. Sometimes you drop it down and you kind of linger on a word as you're talking quietly, which is interesting. Can you talk very quickly when you're talking very softly? Yes, you can. But something about being soft also makes you slow down a little and helps you emphasize words, emphasize the entire word. Interesting. All right. Next one. Speak pulling off the words, i.e. not finishing them. Now finish and follow each word and thought through to the end, keeping the voice engaged until the end of each word. Does that seem more satisfying and controlled? So here is the ancient floor, foot worn and hollow and thin. Here is the former door, where the dead feet walk in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and high. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. That's horrible. The self-unseeing. Here is the ancient floor, foot-worn and hollowed and thin. Here was the former door, where the dead feet walked in. She sat here in her chair, smiling into the fire. He who played stood there, bowing it higher and higher. Childlike, I danced in a dream. Blessings emblazoned that day. Everything glowed with a gleam. Yet we were looking away. Does that seem more satisfied and controlled? Yeah, it feels way more satisfied and way more controlled. And I think I'll pause there because the next one says is to choose a piece of text with high thinking energy, like any restoration passage or from Oscar Wilde. Mumble the text first and then speak it clearly. Next, speak it too clearly. Over-articulate it. Finally, speak it with life, but not with so much life that the technique of speaking masks the words. So I think I will pause and I will do that. I will start there next time. I will highlight that one so I know where to start. And I will do the final 3 exercises. That's one of them in the Need for Words, chapter 5. And then we will go on to number 6, which is working further with texts, which I guess I'll have to find out if it indeed has things for me to read. I guess I can probably take advantage of next week being a kind of a gimme of I've already read the little short thing to also start reading chapter 6 and find out, okay, what's in store next? Does this suddenly come to a close? Is that it? Is that all? Rodenberg's really, after complaining bitterly about the first half of this book, suddenly there was this gigantic raft in chapter 5 here of exercise after exercise after exercise, which is just what I need. And then I will find out if this is all falling action. Who knows? We'll find out. All right, that was my vocal video for this week. All about, let me say it again because I'm going to have to mislabel my video, devowed, mislabeled. Vocal release of text, part 1.